Of the Zoning and Land Regulation Committee. The first item on the agenda is public comment on any matter not listed on the agenda. Is there anyone here wishing to speak on an item not on the agenda? Okay, we'll move on. And I will make some brief introductions. The ZLR committee members are Supervisor Al Matano, Supervisor Dennis O'Loughlin, Supervisor Jerry Bullock, and I'm the chair, Mary Kolar. And we have Zoning Administrator Roger Lane, the Director of Planning and Development Todd Violante is here, and Dan's not on here, but Dan Everson's here, the Assistant Zoning Administrator. Plus we have Brian Standing, and your title is?
Senior Planner. Senior
Planner, thank you. Not this week, but next time we meet, we'll have our new youth governance members with us. This is a ZLR committee work meeting. Public hearings have been held at previous meetings for the items on the agenda. The committee will not be taking public testimony on these agenda items. However, committee members may call upon persons to speak on an agenda item if there are any questions or concerns. When a petition is called, county staff will update the committee on the status of the petition. The committee members may have concerns or questions. After discussion and decision may be rendered. If a zoning petition is acted upon, it will be placed on the next county board meeting for action, which is July 13th. So it's too soon? Well, we're meeting this week. That's too soon. The next one's July 13th.
That's correct.
Okay. If a conditional use permit is acted upon, it is the county's final action on the matter. The next ZLR committee meeting will be held on June 27th. Have consideration of minutes, but on this agenda, so we'll move on to item E, which is petition rezone 11,120, Stephen Flack in the town of Primrose.
This petition was postponed at the April 25th Zoning and Land Regulation Committee due to no town action. Since that time, we have received town action, and also the petition has been revised. There has been negotiations between some neighbors. Mr. Hizzle, that owns a 5-acre portion of property adjacent to the Flatches right here, decided to swap land with the Flacks and reposition his lot down here. He just basically only uses it for hunting purposes. His current property is landlocked, and the southerly property would be landlocked as well. It does not have any housing density rights. He just uses it for hunting purposes. The town has approved this with no conditions. They had reviewed the alterations to this rezoning request and had no problem with it. So if the ZLR committee chooses to approve this, staff suggests the following conditions and amendments. That the petition shall be amended to include 5 acres of the Hissel land lying north of Ridge Road. The 5 acres shall be included in the RH4 Rural Home Zoning District, making the total acreage of the lot 23.21 acres. The petition shall also be amended to change the zoning to 26.4 acres of land owned by the Flacks that is located south of Ridge Road to A-4. And the petition is contingent upon a land division waiver being granted for the proposed 5-acre lot south of Ridge Road that will have no frontage. And also an access easement shall be recorded to allow access to the 5-acre lot, the most southerly portion of the Flack property, to allow access for hunting purposes.
I move approval.
I'll second. With amendments.
With all the staff conditions and amendments.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve with staff conditions. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
And it's approved. Okay, next, rezone petition 11,123.
This guy
Madam
wants
Chair, I have a question here.
I just had a quick question. I'm Flack. So we're done, right? You
Yep.
explained that much better than I could ever explain it.
Well, thank you.
Ta-da.
I
Great.
tried.
Good night.
Not used to that compliment stuff.
Yeah, we usually get it the other way.
Yeah.
Good night.
Roger didn't know what to say.
Well,
Yeah, right.
drive down TV, you know.
Okay, you ready?
Okay. Let's see. The next petition.
Yes.
Rezoning 11,123 for Kyle Klauwitter.
Yes.
This petition was postponed at the April 25th Zoning and Land Regulation Committee to allow time for the petitioner to address staff concerns. This proposal has been revised by reconfiguring the agricultural lots, so it's no longer configured like that. What they have done is actually made two residential lots. One does not have any road frontage, but they're using this access way. So there are the two new residential lots. The existing house is one large A1 exclusive agricultural lot. There is a second agricultural lot that's being created, and then this is also going to be an agricultural lot, zone A-4 with no housing density right, which will be sold in conjunction with this house. They cannot have this all as one big lot because of the town policies creating lots no larger than 2 acres.
What did the town do?
They have approved this with some conditions, the conditions are as follows. Lot 1 and 2 shall be assigned the zoning district classification of RH1. The 23-acre parcel described as Lot 3 shall be assigned the zoning district classification A-4. The remaining A1 exclusive lands shall be deed restricted to prohibit further residential development. The final CSM will need to show an access agreement for the 35.1 acres. Since the cul-de-sac is offset from the current right-of-way, vacation and dedication will need to be recorded. So basically, they're going to have to do some vacation. It suggests that a delayed effective date of 180 days be placed on this, just to make sure that we have enough time for that vacation of roads. And a shared driveway easement agreement shall be recorded on lots 1 and 2 pursuant to our county ordinances to allow the drive access to lot 2.
I'm going to move approval with the amendments and a delayed effective date of 180 days.
With the conditions?
Conditions.
Is Carl here?
Yes.
Carl, are you okay with those conditions?
Why the 180 days for the vacating?
Well, you could, as soon as that CSM is approved, you could record it. So it extends the processing of that certified survey map. It grants you this time frame of 180 days to perform those duties, that condition. So it could be done in less time than that.
Oh, okay.
But we generally have 90 days, but because vacation of a road takes a class 3 notice and the town has to do some actions on shifting that around.
There's a formal resolution that the town has to take up.
Yeah, that just allows for time just in case something gets postponed or something. But the 180 days is the maximum time. If you had the CSM all ready to go right now, everything would be happening tomorrow.
So you're good now, Kyle?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
We have a motion, we don't have a second.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve with staff recommended conditions. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
And it's approved. Okay. Next is petition rezone 11,132, Tina Hayward in the town of Rutland. And just that is followed by CUP 2379.
This petition was postponed at the May 23rd Zoning and Land Regulation Committee due to no town action. There was no public opposition or anything of that nature. Since that time, the town of Rutland has approved this petition, as well as the conditional use permit with no conditions. Staff is suggesting several conditions be placed on this petition, actually 8 petitions, basically saying that the limited family business is limited to a cleaning service. They will need to comply with the standards of a limited family business, such as only family employees and 1 non-family member, hours of operation, as well as the CUP expires when the current owners sell the property.
Are they, anybody here representing them?
We are, yes.
Are you okay?
Yes.
Thank you. I'll move approval with the condition.
CUP first?
I'll move passing the CUP first.
I'll second.
Okay, and that's with staff condition. Were there any conditions on the CUP, or that's just the rezone?
That's the 8. That's the 8 conditions on the conditional use permit.
Okay, so
With the conditions.
with the conditions on
With
the
the
CUP.
condition.
Okay, we have a motion and a second for approval of the CUP with staff recommended conditions. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
And it's approved. And the rezone,
I'll move approval of rezone with
Second.
and there weren't any conditions on the rezone. Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve the rezone. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
And the rezone is approved. All right, thanks. You're welcome. All right, plats and survey, certified survey maps.
This first one is Tennyson Ridge replat, City of Madison, just located north of Northport Drive. Consists of 7 lots, 1.5 acres. There's no parks shown. Northport Drive to the south as far as being a major corridor. All lots are subject to public easements for drainage purposes. And this is before you for a certification of non-objection. The crosshatched area is a tree preservation easement that is shown on the plat.
I'll move we do not object.
Second.
We have a motion of not, and a second for non-objection. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
And it's certified.
Next one is Astor Drive addition to Stoner Prairie, located in the city of Fitchburg. This consists of 3 lots, about 1 acre in size. As far as major highways go, South Seminole is to the west, and all lots subject to public easements for drainage purposes, and there are drainage arrows shown as well.
Whatever.
Certification of non-objection.
That would be what I'd move.
Okay,
second.
we have a motion and a second for certification of non-objection. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
And it's certified. Okay. Wellington Trace.
The next 3 plats are preliminary plats that are before you for acceptance and scheduled for future consideration. The first one is Wellington Trace, Town of Bristol, Section 30. This one consists of 33 lots, a little over 40 acres. The zoning district classification is A1, agricultural. There is no rezone application involved. I've outlined the following conditions that will be applicable as far as approving the preliminary plat. And,
For all of them?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, the only red flag with this one is the hydric soils are shown within the 40 acres. And there's a map within the packet here that's got the hydric soils shown. And there was some preliminary data that was submitted as part of this package. So that's probably the only concern that's going to generate a little conversation.
ETJ, not an issue.
No, the city of Sun Prairie has communicated to me that they have waived their authority on this one, although they did want a copy of the plat just for
Oh, yeah.
informational purposes.
Sure.
So,
I'll move we accept and schedule this plat.
Second.
Okay, we'll just do one at a time then. Wellington Trace, we have the first and the second for acceptance and schedule. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
And so we accept and schedule Wellington Trace. Next, Welcome Homes.
yeah, this is located in the town of Middleton, section 30. Consists of 14 residential lots with 2 outlots, a little over 18 acres. Same situation as the last one with a zoning classification of A1. No rezone involved. And then I've outlined the following conditions that will be applicable. Pretty standard with this one. 2 weeks ago, you saw a 2-lot certified survey map that had some commercial zoning that was adjacent to this one. So this plat kind of goes hand in hand with that certified survey map.
I'll move acceptance and schedule.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second for acceptance and scheduling of Welcome Homes. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
And accept.
And the next one is located on the town of Westport, the community of Bishop's Bay, referred to as the Prairie and the Farm, Phase 5. Consists of 86 residential lots with 16 outlots. The zoning is under the City of Middleton extraterritorial zoning jurisdiction. And I have outlined in the map that's attached some of the language with regards to Chapter 75. Because there's going to be a few things that are a little bit different with regards to our standard conventional plats that we normally see. For example, the streets in this, some of the streets in this plat are being shown as private, not being dedicated to the public. Minimum frontage requirements, things like that. However, with regards to the City of Middleton extraterritorial, we do have a provision in 75 as well that requirements and standard of this chapter may be waived by the committee. This falls under the planned unit development section within Chapter 75. So when this plat comes back before you for conditional approval, most likely there's going to be just one waiver with regards to the standard regarding the several issues that don't necessarily meet Chapter 75's requirements.
Private street,
Yeah.
lot width.
Yep.
Good.
So, and I just found out that the Town of Westport Plan Commission has recommended approval, subject to numerous conditions. So,
Is this the same golf community that's called Bishop's Bay?
I believe so. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But it's not attached?
I don't think so. Is there anybody?
It is not attached.
Okay. And there'll
This
be
is
no
not
back...
low-income housing, believe me.
What? What'd you say, Dennis?
It's not low-income
Oh,
housing.
no.
All the cul-de-sacs will be private.
Yeah.
Okay. I'll move we accept and schedule this Bishop's
Second.
Bay.
Okay, we have a motion and a second for acceptance and schedule for future consideration. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? And so it's accepted and scheduled. No resolutions, no ordinance amendments. We have a report to the committee.
Yes, I'm the staff lead for the comprehensive revision of Chapter 10 subcommittee, which is a subcommittee of this committee. Dennis sits on there. He's the chair of that. And we've been meeting for just about a year now to do a comprehensive revision of the Dane County zoning ordinance. And this is what I've handed out here is the schedule of sort of what our meetings have been about and what the topics have been. I'm happy to report that we're right on schedule. We have a meeting scheduled for next Monday where we'll be hopefully doing the final work on the text of the new zoning ordinance and then releasing a public comment draft. And so the plan from Monday forward will be to schedule a sort of a work meeting with as many town officials and other interested parties as we can get. We're still working out the details of that. and then provide some sort of a summary of what we've done with the zoning ordinance text, and then give a period of time to try and get some comments, particularly from town officials. And then hopefully make whatever revisions we need to out of that process, and then present it back to the zoning committee by September. So that's our target date. I must say I've worked in Dane County for over 20 years now, and this committee is one of the hardest working and most dedicated subcommittees I've ever had the pleasure to serve. And people show up, they're ready to work. They've accomplished a tremendous amount of work so far, and they're continuing to work on the process. So one of the things that once we get the text set, and the other thing I should mention is that we've been providing updates on this process to a pretty extensive mailing list of every town planning commissioner and every town board member for whom we have contact information. We've been posting sort of regular working drafts of the ordinance text online. We're starting to get some comments from individual town officials, and we're trying to incorporate those. The other thing I should mention is that at the beginning of the process, we did a survey of town planning commissioners and town boards to ask what kinds of things would you want to see in a new ordinance. We got a very good response, I think, to that initial survey. And we've had a number of people attend some of the meetings. The meetings have been in various locations around the county. And we've had a few meetings where we've gotten really good attendance from the public, and a number where we've gotten less so. But I think the end product, in my professional opinion, is looking really good. So we're hoping by September to be able to present you with a really state-of-the-art zoning ordinance that will address, I think, a lot of the long-standing concerns that have been voiced in the past about the current zoning ordinance.
For the 19th, did you get Supervisor Williams's topic on that?
Yes, I will.
Okay. Yeah, we'll talk about that on the 19th.
Yep.
So, questions for Brian?
The only comment I'll make, Brian, is we're going to have one chance with this end product. And I would like to, as chair of that committee, either add a meeting of the committee so that we could even make it a closed meeting if we wanted to. What I'd like to see is the 3 or 4 highly controversial issues be updated for the committee so that when we go out and face the public on this, that we as a committee can speak from one voice. And I'm particularly talking about shoreline zoning when we worked on that.
I'm sorry, I'm not familiar with what you mean by the shoreline zoning. There's not a shoreline zoning component in the natural resource identification?
That's it.
Okay.
Yeah. And the mineral extraction.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe if it were just a short meeting so that we on the committee know what the hot buttons are going to be. We have, and I don't think they're going to be hot. I'm going to be more optimistic than that. But that we, as committee members, all can speak from the same hymnal.
I certainly can prepare an update on that, or to some extent, I could talk a little bit about those now, whatever you want. We're going to have an update on the mineral extraction component on Monday. And I think, and also on some of the overlay districts for the subcommittee.
Monday is the Chapter 10 meeting.
That's correct.
Well, that's when I think we should talk about it.
Okay, and that's on the agenda for those.
Oh, good.
How about, a brief sheet,
Yep.
1-page
Right.
summary.
That's what I'm thinking about.
Sure.
So that when we come to you at this body, we are all familiar with
No
it.
surprises.
We'll have time for that on Monday for the
Okay,
Chapter
good,
10 subcommittee.
good. The other thing is, I got to tell you, Brian, you have done an outstanding job on this.
Thank you.
not so much, and you put together a lot of data for us, you kept us on track. I try to help you with that. But more importantly, what I saw was you were looking at the issues from both sides. What's best for the community and what's best for the county? And we were able to narrow that down, and I really want to commend you on that, in front of your boss especially.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Since we're here and we have some people, does anyone have any questions that you're hanging out? Very good.
And certainly, if there's any questions about the content of the ordinance or the process or anything that the committee members, feel free to contact, either ask me now or feel free to contact me individually, and I'll be happy to answer whatever I can. The other thing I should mention is that right now we're working on putting out zoning maps. So that's a bit of an undertaking, but we're slowly cranking through it. I also wanted to let you know that I've been working with our GIS people to make sure that as rezones are approved through this body and through the county board, that we're tracking them into the new ordinance as well. So by the time, the way the process should work under the statutes is if we're planning on getting this introduced through ZLR in September. We'll need a little bit of time. At the same time, we'll probably be submitting it to the state for farmland preservation certification. And then hopefully, if all goes well and the county board adopts the new ordinance, say effective January of 2018, from that point forward, all the towns will have a year to decide whether or not to adopt the new ordinance. And that applies to all of the towns in Dane County, including ones that have already voted to opt out under the newer opt-out statute. So all the towns in the county will have an option to whether or not to adopt the new ordinance. It will become effective in that town as soon as that town adopts it.
Okay, so it's not waiting a year.
They don't have to wait a year, but that's the maximum amount. And during that period of time, the current ordinance will remain in effect until such time as the town board adopts the new one.
And I did have a question because we voted on a plat in the town of Westport. So is there a date where we won't be voting on plats in the town of Westport?
I believe we decided September, if I remember right, was the kind of the cutoff date with regards to taking in applications.
Todd?
That's the next report item.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll get into that.
Anything else from Ryan? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for an outstanding job.
Thank you very much.
Great job, Brian.
Thank you.
Hi.
Hello. So the next item on the agenda was an update on towns opting out of county zoning.
They're kind of blocked together. But it's
Yeah.
okay.
So it's a nice segue into this topic. So as the committee knows, ultimately we had 6 towns that followed through on the process to withdraw from county zoning. They're Berry, Blue Mounds, Springfield, Sun Prairie, Westport, and Bristol. So what we're looking at now, perhaps from our perspective, from an administrative, departmental perspective, is how are we going to manage this jurisdictional transfer in terms of land use? So there are a number of things. There are 4 things in particular that we're thinking about right now, and that I think this is a good opportunity to brief the committee on our thinking, at least to this point. And the first relates to the topic or the question that you posed to Dan. When we have a transfer, that right now we're looking at the jurisdiction changing officially January 1st of 2018, we want to minimize the number of uncompleted actions in the pipeline. So we don't want to have zoning petitions going to the, say, November or December public hearing for ZLR and carrying forward in those 6 towns into the new year, and then suddenly having a new zoning ordinance applicable, no county zoning authority in those towns. And it raises a host of other enforcement questions and placement of conditions on rezones and CUPs. And so we've started thinking about, well, if our objective is to minimize the number of these loose ends that would carry forward at the point of transfer of the jurisdiction, that suggests to us that we should probably identify deadlines or last dates by which we will take the last application in. So a good example, we have a number of actions that we'd be thinking about. Rezones and CUPs in particular, of significant note to this committee. Zoning permits, just the day-to-day zoning permit for the deck or for a new single-family residence in these 6 towns. Issues relating to land division subdivision, as you posed to Dan. So we met as staff and we started brainstorming a little bit on this topic to think about, well, working backwards from January 1st, how long about does it take on average, typically, for these types of actions to be completed and wrapped up? And they vary across the board. So the best example that I can use, I think, to show the issues we're dealing with is September 21st is the deadline date, the application deadline date for rezones and CUPs going to the November 28th ZLR public hearing. There's a possibility that CUPs may be wrapped up before the end of the year, for the most part. Rezones, if there's any issues associated with them, they'll go to the November 28th public hearing. Some of those may very well go to the December work meeting, which is December 13th or December 11th. I think we have one meeting scheduled for December. There may or may not be enough time to get to county board, and there's not enough time to get to the executive for signature, to get published by the clerk in the paper, and if there are any modifications to the rezones, the process that kicks it back to the town for action to bring it to fruition. So, we're starting to get into a time period whereby we've got to maybe not take in applications, or if we take in applications beyond a certain point, that we put out a disclaimer saying, caution applicant and agent, your application may not be brought to fruition in time before this jurisdictional transfer takes place. And then we have to ask ourselves, well, what happens in that event? Do we package something and give it to the town and say, these are the rezones that we had pending, the CUPs we had pending, zoning permits that we haven't done first or second inspections on or issued certificates of compliance with. These are the land divisions that were in the hopper that didn't get final approval or signature. So we're thinking about this issue. We're trying to establish some timeframes that we'll be able to then put out to the community. I'd like to, for each of those, if we proceed down this path, explain the rationale and the timing that we're taking into account. But it's something that we've got to complete our thoughts on. And we'll certainly be including the committee in this deliberation because ultimately it's going to be a community decision. There may be some backlash from the towns withdrawing or from applicants that are wanting to bring a project into play and may not be able to. And how best should we manage that process? There are probably a few different alternatives of how we could manage this issue, manage this transition. Another alternative could be to run everything right up to December 31st, and then anything that's not brought to fruition, just kind of, they have to restart the process with the towns. But I think that's unfair to property owners to A, set up that expectation, or B, that they would spend money on an application and then find that they have to reproduce that same process with the town under a new zoning ordinance and with a different decision-making body. So, there's this issue of application, when we stop taking in certain applications and permits, that we're still thinking through as staff, and we'll be bringing something back to you. I have briefed the executive's office on this. I believe Josh was planning to try and reach out to DCTA and to Renee to get their thoughts on it. How do we engage those 6 towns in our thinking on this? Ultimately, our objective, I think, should be to, for the public good, just effectuate a smooth transition and try and do it as competently as possible and minimize the impact on the public.
But I think we want to do it so that it is in our favor, so that we have enough time to adequately tell them on this date, no further applications, and what's in the pipe, we have all good intentions to have this wrapped up by December 31. So if that meant September 1 or...
I couldn't agree more, and that's really the sort of the guiding theme, is that we want to put public notice out there. We want to, I think, we see the gamut. We see rezones that go through the process very quickly, and that will be wrapped up before the end of the year. But there are always complicating factors. There are issues that come up, whether it's a rezone or a CUP or a land division or a
Or the
subdivision.
town doesn't sign off on them on time and we miss a
Right.
meeting here, then it's another several weeks.
And this issue is not just rezones. This issue just doesn't pertain to rezones and CUPs. It's the zoning permits. If we have a zoning permit we take in for a new single-family residence, that requires, before we'll issue the certificate of occupancy, we have a first inspection. When the footings are poured, we go out and inspect, and then we do a second inspection, usually when things are wrapped up. And then we'll issue the certificate of occupancy or certificate of compliance. And that may not happen as we're going into the winter months. Construction schedules may get delayed, financing decisions may change. So we'll have a whole host of different types of issues in these 6 towns that will carry forward, as this transfer takes place. So we're trying to think through that.
I would think that the 6 towns of Barry, Blue Mountains, Town of Sun Prairie, Westport, Bristol, and who's the 6th one?
Springfield.
Okay, I'm thinking that as quickly as possible that a letter goes out to these 6 towns telling them that we're looking at dates, and any input that you may have to help us would be appreciated. But we have to make some decisions here very quickly so that it doesn't bog you down. And, there's going to be a gap.
Of service.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And, you're talking about some towns that do some building. Springfield? Westport?
Bristol.
Bristol? So, because I can hear somebody saying, well, the county didn't let us know until September 2nd, and they said they're going to cut it off on the 15th. We had no, the quicker we can get just a notice out to them that this is what our thinking is, and anything you could add to this or help us with would be appreciated.
And you
Yeah.
have, or you're about to reach out to Renee Lawler?
I believe Josh may already have.
Okay,
I've got a
Josh.
call into
Gotcha.
him. He was going to when he and I last met, and then we were going to check in after he had made contact. So
Because each township may want to handle it a little bit differently.
Yeah,
it may.
absolutely.
And I think it is really imperative to stay on good terms with these townships and help them through that interim process, so.
Is that because when they come back?
Okay.
Make them feel welcome.
Yeah, but anyway, I would think the quicker the better as far as coordinating with them.
I would agree.
How would you like us to handle this?
Yeah, we've got our own thoughts as staff compiled. We've got some dates in mind that we think would be appropriate depending on the action. Even still, there are going to be exceptions to that. We've also talked about the idea of having some sort of a notice or a disclaimer as a formal part of the application that we would work with Corporation Counsel on, saying, caution applicant, this issue is in play. Your application may not get through the process before this transfer takes place, and so on. So in addition to that issue of the deadlines, and I appreciate that, we will certainly reach out to those towns and begin to talk through this issue. I think we want to maintain some degree of consistency. The towns may differ in how they want to approach it, but ultimately I would recommend that we try to maintain one standard
Right.
for all the towns.
Absolutely.
Instead of having a different town trying to approach it differently. So, again, we're working with the executive's office, and we'll be working with DCTA in those towns to try and make a smooth transition here. Some of the other issues that come into play are records transfer. The towns will need access to some body of our records, our historical files on zoning permits and rezones and CUPs and so forth. So we've got some ideas in mind on how we might be able to leverage existing programs like Access Dane or Laserfish that we use in the department to try and set up a portal for access to some of our electronic records to the towns, but that may only get access to a certain volume of records. So that's something else we're thinking about, access to historical records. Excuse me. And also our zoning map. What we're planning at this point is that that's something that we can roll over as of December 31st. Whatever the state of the parcels are in, that our office maintains our parcel records as well as zoning designations, we can draw that line as of that most current date and then package that in electronic form and hard copy media and hand that off to those 6 towns as they exit county zoning. They'll at least know, they have a snapshot in time of what the zoning designations were. That's something I think we have a pretty good handle on, and how we can provide that to the towns and their consultant. So that's what we have in terms of the opt-out, and it's managing this transition, this jurisdictional transfer, and how we can do that most effectively, and putting out that issue, A, to let you know we're working on it, B, that we're open to talking about it, and that we want you to be aware of the issue in general.
Todd, if we look at these 6 towns, what percentage of our zoning business in 15 and 16 were done in these 6 towns?
We did a calculation based on January through May of this year of all of the single-family permits that we issued, and I believe the 6 account for about 20% of total zoning permits for new single-family residences. The big issue there is the town of Bristol. The other towns have a smaller proportion, but the town of Bristol accounts for the 3 biggest towns in terms of permit issuances. Was number 1, Windsor, which already became a village and exited. Town of Middleton, and then I believe Bristol was 3rd, and Sun Prairie's right there in the mix. So it's that the disproportionate impact of Bristol on that volume.
Other questions for Todd?
Yeah, I do.
I was going to say,
Supervisor.
go right ahead.
Go ahead.
One was, well, on the scheduling, I think one thing to remember too is people don't pour as many foundations in January as July, so the schedule might be a little more forgiving than you realize. So I was going to ask the impact of them leaving on our ability to produce the plat map that is so handy. Will that be hard to do with the towns subdividing land?
That is a good question, Al. We'll broach that topic with our.
Will have no effect.
We provide it for the cities and villages currently that
Anything
are outside
that-
of the city of Madison, right?
Anything that's recorded with the Register of Deeds, any land division, gets downloaded to our property listers.
Okay.
And the property listers redo the parcel boundaries. So it really will have no effect. Anything that gets recorded with the Register of Deeds as a land division will show up on our parcel mapping, and that's where our plat books are generated from.
We're preparing our 2018 budget for the county. We're starting the process right now. With this impact, how is it going to impact your budget?
We're still working with the controller's office, and as we now have our budget charge for the 2018 budget, we'll be getting into that in more detail. But I can tell you, based on about 6 years' worth of permitting information, the 6 towns on an annual average in sum would account for about $87,000 in permitting revenues. And then the other part of that is the levy portion. You know, how much, you'll remember from Act 178 that it clarifies that towns may levy on behalf of themselves an amount, they may exceed their levy limit by an amount to enable them to perform these services and to pay for these services at the town level. What exactly that means for the county is a question that I think Chuck is still thinking through. But we can try to account, we have tried to account for what that could be. And that could be, on the order of, let's say, another $40,000 in levy money, if our assumptions are correct. Ultimately, that number would be decided by the Department of Revenue. And we've started talking with Chuck about it. We use that as part of the calculation that we communicated to the towns on prior to the April vote, but at the town level, the annual town meetings. And for these 6, we put it in the ballpark of about a $40,000 proportionate share of levy that would come to our department to pay for these services. So in total, I think we have
$125,000.
about $125,000 is
That's open in your budget, roughly, right?
could be, yeah. The levy portion of it is probably a little bit more
Yeah.
subject to further analysis, but the thing that we have a better handle on, because it's immediately under our purview, is the permitting revenues. And that on average for these 6 would total about $87,000. So we're in that wheelhouse of impact.
Other questions? Any comments from, yes?
What consideration's been given to, I don't know if I'm going to say this right, contracting with the municipalities that have opted out for Dane County to administer the zoning for them, so they maintain local control, but can utilize the Dane County people to administer it? And then you'd have a seamless changeover and agreement.
That topic has been broached. I think there's some reservation, I think perhaps on the part of various entities that may have reservations about doing that. I think it has been asked, the question has been asked, could towns withdraw from county zoning and not be subject to the county decision-making authority and county representation in those matters, but yet receive the services that are paid for? The issue that comes up is that the county levy is comprised of revenues from towns, cities, and villages in the county. So the cities and villages actually pay a large proportion of the levy money that comes to the county, and in turn a large proportion, say 80% of the levy money that comes to our department to pay for those services. And when you take the urban representation that's represented on the county board out of that equation in terms of representation, but then you're still letting the towns benefit from that large financial share from the cities and villages, it creates issues with I don't know if I'm expressing this well enough or clearly enough, but the cities and villages are still paying for a chunk of those services, a big chunk of it, yet you're denying county input into how those funds are expended. So those are the types of issues that come up. I don't want to call it a political discussion. It's a representation and taxation issue that comes into play. So if the county were to pay, if the county were to charge the full cost of those services comparable to what it would be paid in the private sector, it magnifies the cost. If you take out that cost benefit that comes from the urban areas, the cities and villages, and on top of that you charge what an hourly rate would be in the private sector, which I can tell you it's probably going to be on the order of 2.5 to 3 times more than what it costs our staff to do the same work, the cost goes up. And then it becomes a question of, would it really then be in the town's interest to receive services in that way? So it becomes kind of a complicated discussion. It's a very good thought, and it did come up multiple times in this whole discussion. And I think the Towns Association's initial preference was to do that, to just contract back with the county for those services. But it raises a host of other questions.
But it does make the most sense economically, and my background is economics. If you've got a township paying $55,000 for services in the private sector, and you can do that work for $40,000, and you get 20% more business, the economies of scale obviously benefit the county as well as the township. Everybody wins, I would think. Just from the economic standpoint, it seems to make the most sense to me.
Exactly.
Yep.
But politically, maybe not.
Or, do you have a comment?
Just
Not really, but it might make sense for those towns that opted out because it may lower their costs. But then again, the same equation would be, it doesn't make much sense that my citizen voters are paying so much. So, yeah.
Okay.
It raises a lot of complications, and I don't have much sympathy for those towns that opted out.
Very good. Thank you.
There was the economy of scale benefit, to the status quo. I think.
We're curious the need to help.
Yeah. It's
Okay,
a very
good.
good question, though.
Any other comments or questions? Any supervisors? Okay, thank you. Good update.
Thank you.
Having no other business,
Move adjourned.
Second.
we have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye. Good. Excellent.
Well, I have time.
Are you saying